Welcome back, everyone. This week, we're going to be talking about what's going on in Argentina and seemingly how very few people are covering it and what kind of opportunities exist in Argentina, as well as ways that I'm playing it and ways that it could be played. So, year to date, everybody, for the most part, wants to be discussing how the NASDAQ is up almost 40%. But then, so very few of them are discussing how Argentina, ticker symbol ARGT, is the ETF, how it's also up almost 40% year to date. And there's a reason to that. And the reason is the elections coming up in October and the runoffs that could occur in November, and a new president being seated by the end of the year, being that the current president is not running for re-election. Another common stock everyone's talking about is doing so well, which is Meta Platforms, Facebook. And yet, here we have ticker symbol GGAL, a financial service company in Latin America, Argentina, is up over 200% for the year. And then I didn't provide photo stocks for these, but you have a lot of the oil producers and explorers in Argentina and Latin America that are up relatively much more so than the Exxons and Chevrons and BPs of the world. And yet I see very little discussion happening from that. Whether that's ticker symbol EC, whether that's ticker symbol PBR or PBR.A, you can look these up for yourself and see that they're actually doing quite well. Now, the way I'm playing this is, as the description of the video title shows, is YPF. Now, it just so happens that the primaries are happening today. Today's August 13th, so one of those things that you should probably stay up on, and I probably should have published this a few weeks in advance, but I didn't, so maybe things dip and then that provides buying opportunity, or it dips because the turnaround that could happen for the country is less likely to occur, and therefore you shouldn't buy the dip. Not all dip should be bought. Now, I want to say that there's two things, I don't want to call them regrets, but two things that upset me so far this year in my own managing of my portfolio. And that is that there's a certain company that I've not bought all year, and I always thought it would go lower. And all it's done is go, well, not all it's done, but it's not gone low enough seemingly for my liking to buy it. And then on earnings a week or two ago, it ripped a good 18 to 24%. And I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and start dollar cost averaging, if you will, into that name. The second thing that really bothers me is how in the hell did I miss this Argentina trade? Because these names are hundreds of percent, some of them are hundreds of percent off of their lows, breaking out of big bases, multi-quarter, multi-year bases. And I don't want to say I've missed the trade, but I missed the inflection, I missed the catalyst, I missed the whole thing. Which is really upsetting, being that I've been paying attention to places like Turkey or what's going on currently in Niger and how that's affecting, say, Global Atomic, the uranium miner, and that company's shares have puked in the last few months. I've been paying attention to the copper issues in Chile, the threat of nationalization for the lithium mines in Chile. Been paying attention to Petrobras and how it's developing the offshore projects. My attention has been heavily focused in Latin America actually this year. And yet somehow I missed the Argentina trade. And I guess one could say it's unforgiving and I need to get better. But here we are. And this trade actually came to my attention, I would say, early to mid-June. And I'm not good at buying a run-up. I'm not good at buying the hype for numerous reasons. And so I've been waiting to enter a position to this point. And I finally executed on that trade in part in this last week. So what's going on in Argentina? Well, inflation's the worst that it's been for decades. And we're tapping on almost 120% inflation year over year. And the reason that's relevant isn't for all the implications of inflation. One of the reasons inflation is relevant is because of how humans are. And let me tell you something about humans. For the most part, humans need catastrophe in order to make a change. They need a heart attack in order to stop smoking or to get healthy. They need a heartache and a heartbreak to course correct their character and become a more comprehensive individual and more attractive to the other gender. They need to hit rock bottom before they get their life straight. It's a sad situation. You could sit someone down who's doing well enough and tell them how to modify and adapt their behavior to get more out of life, and they won't. What they need is catastrophe. And what happens is, I don't know all the science, but the neural plasticity finally opens up during catastrophe, because when catastrophe strikes, you actually open your mind to options and are willing to accept course correction. And you're either going to double down on your ego-invested beliefs and narratives and your ideologies, or you're finally going to break free of the limitations of them. So when you make money and then that money is halved in a very short period of time, then it kind of makes your life feel futile. And then what do you have to lose, metaphorically and literally? And then that's when big changes occur, is when shit hits the fan, as the colloquialism goes, or idiomatic expression. So with inflation at these heights, 10%, 20%, you can ignore that. You can justify it. You can roll your eyes and mumble under your breath and muddle through. But when numbers start hitting 50, 100%, I don't know, Zimbabwe, we're talking thousands, Weimar, history has many examples, and those are the most latent examples, but there's other ones, other countries in Europe, that Israel, I believe, was one of those that inflation got wild and crazy. And when that happens, you see big changes occur. So you could say, because the going joke, which isn't really a joke, unfortunately, about Argentina is that every 10 years they have a 10-year crisis, which is to say that they're perpetually in crises. And you could say, why is this time different? And then, well, I'm pointing out a reason why it might be different, which is not the same as saying why it is different. I don't know if it's different. As a person who believes that the past is the best predictor of the future, except, the trend is your friend except at the bend. So the crowd is almost always right, except at turning points. So then you have to ask, is this a turning point? And then what would make it a turning point? And then, well, people being fed up enough. And the probability is that they'll continue down the same route that they've been doing, and it's an evergreen story. Every election, this time is different. This is why things can change. And it's just the same old, same old. It's the pipe dream promises that partner or that boss or that president or that campaign makes, and it never manifests and materializes. And I would say, because that's how humans work and politicians are humans, that's the probabilistic outcome. But when there's enough asymmetry in a trade, then you take a stab at it, position size accordingly, know when your thesis changes, and know when to get out. So, inflation's high. Also, Argentine election, fortune telling. The links to many of these slides will be in the description. So what you have essentially is Massa versus Patricia Bullrich versus, Horacio Larreta and then Javier Milei. And Javier Milei is, you could think as a libertarian, far-right libertarian, Massa is pretty much the Peronist who's being backed. And if Massa gets elected, then I'll dump my trade at a loss, because it'll be at a loss by that point. The market will have foreseen it, and more likely than not, and I'll be selling for a loss. I'll get out the trade. My money is on Patricia Bullrich being elected. Now, Argentina elections and the polling of those elections are known to not be that accurate. So you have to take that into consideration. And right now, Massa has the lead. Now, if Patricia Bullrich and Horacio Larreta consolidate into one, then they'll probably win. I don't think Milei is going to win. I just don't. And the thing is that pretty much the people voting for Bullrich versus Larreta are in the same camp, so they'll consolidate the vote. This happens many times in election cycles, especially in non-first world countries, in which you have an extremely fractionalized voting block and people to vote for, and what happens is 10 different people get 9% of the vote, and then the 10th person gets 10% of the vote, and they barely win, even though only a small fraction of the constituencies and the potential voting bloc voted for them. That's what happens. So if Bullrich and Larreta and the Milei voters all fragment their voting, then Massa will win. So if they can come together, then they'll beat the Massa, and time will tell. So what will happen to YPF after the peso elections, that's an acronym, according to the Brazilian bank Bradesco? I'll just read it. The primary elections this Sunday, which is today, the recording of this video, may not only mark the political course of Argentina, but also one of its many companies. According to a report by the Brazilian bank Bradesco, the oil and energy company YPF could quote close to 4 times the EV to EBITDA, or US $30 per ADR. American Depository Receipt, for those who don't know. That's if you typed in YPF into Google, it's the ADR that will pop up. It goes on to say, if Patricia Bullrich or Horacio Rodriguez Larreta, the pre-candidates of Together for Change, reach the presidency. That, however, will not be defined this Sunday, although the results may set a trend. The investment bank, prepared by analysts, published by Bloomberg News, highlights that YPF is currently trading at around $14 per share. And if that could recover if the main opposition coalition, Together for Change, shows a higher than expected voting intention in the elections this Sunday. And they add that the difference between Bullrich and Larreta is not in the alignment of policies, but in the strategy, which is why I was saying earlier that the voting base between those divided between the Bullrich and the Larreta, if they can come together and strategically align towards one or the other, or those two can consolidate, then well, that's quite advantageous. Regarding the candidacy of Sergio Massa, the report highlights that if it emerges stronger from peso, it would be a surprise that would impact YPF at a disadvantage, which could trade at US $10 a share. Okay, so that means we'd be going from $14 a share to $10 a share. We'll call that a 30% pullback. So that's why I said if things come out and the pullback happens, come Monday morning or Tuesday, whenever the results really start becoming finalized, then you could see a big pullback, in which case I'll be immediately underwater and reconsidering the whole thesis. Now, you could say, what's some bullish things for YPF? Like maybe even if Massa wins, why could YPF do well? Maybe not in the short term, but the mid to long term. And one of those reasons is not, like I said, I don't think Javier Milei will get elected, but he said, as it says, said today that the company YPF and and the airlines have to be privatized, adding that nothing that is done by the state can be considered as efficient during a proselytizing activity that he led in Mar del Plata. YPF has to be privatized, like airlines. They have an exorbitant number of political posts. That doesn't work that way. So, YPF is owned 51% by the government. 49% of it, you could say, has been privatized. And the reason, in part, that they would privatize it is to raise money. Because Argentina needs dollars. And if they can sell their share of YPF, not that I necessarily think that they would, but if they could, that would raise money, pay off debts, be able to afford imports and the like. Another bullish reason for YPF is the Vaca Muerta, which is, I believe, the second largest shale oil field in the world. It goes on to say, with investors seemingly motivated by the company's solid performance at the Vaca Muerta shale oil and gas formation, YPF's ADR on the New York Stock Exchange was rising by 2.57%. They reported earnings a few days ago. According to a company statement, unconventional activities continued as the main driver of growth, with total shale production reaching a new record. During the second quarter, unconventional crude production grew by 28%, while unconventional gas production increased by 10%, both compared to the same quarter of the previous year. YPF also celebrated the resumption of oil exports after 18 years. So this is an important thing. They're building a pipeline. The Trans-Andean pipeline was successfully put back in operation during the second quarter, allowing the evacuating of crude oil to Chile, the company stated. You have to remember that we live in a global world. Like what's happening in Niger right now and its effect on Global Atomic. As a side note, so Global Atomic, uranium mine in Niger. So how does one sell the uranium? Or what does it take to run a uranium exploration project, development project, and inevitably a mine? Well, it takes energy. Well, it just so happens that Niger gets most of its energy from Nigeria. And Nigeria has cut off most of the electricity to Niger because, well, they're punishing the recent coup that's happened. Then I believe it's Benin is the port that Niger uses to ship its goods. So here, exploration, development, and mining company is struggling to get electricity. They're struggling to get access to ports, and the country is struggling to get imports, which is to say goods, parts, services. And Niger has cut off its airlines, which is going to make it quite difficult for people to get in and out of Niger, as well as, well, the things you need to fix equipment and so on and so forth. So the same goes for Argentina. Like just because a country has access to the waterways or the ocean doesn't necessarily mean that's where they do their exporting or importing from, as I just explained with Niger. So this Trans-Andean pipeline between the Argentina-Chile cooperative is a very bullish thing. Argentina's YPF signals high imports in Q3 as it ramps up pipelines. This pipeline's kind of an important deal. For anybody living in America, they perhaps might understand what a pipeline symbolizes and what it can mean. It goes on to say, YPF leads the development of Vaca Muerta, a Belgium-sized formation in Patagonia's province, which analysts believe could in a few years help the country reverse a multi-billion-dollar energy deficit and become a net energy exporter. Right now they're importing a lot of things. So it's summer in the North Hemisphere, it's winter in the South Hemisphere. And it's hard to import energy when you don't have dollars, as is the case for Argentina. Earlier this week, Chile's state oil firm, ENAP, signed a deal with YPF to import crude through the Trans-Andino pipeline out of Vaca Muerta, which the two firms co-own with Chevron Corp. YPF said Friday it should see full benefits from the exports to Chile by the final quarter of this year, with a 45-day contract enabling ENAP to buy 41,000 barrels of oil per day. The Trans-Andino pipeline, set to begin exports in the coming weeks, should pump out some 70,000 barrels per day by year end and continue growing over 2024 towards its full capacity of 110,000 barrels per day, which is to say that it's running at a third of capacity, well, a little over a third, 40% of capacity, we'll call it. The Vaca Muerta North Pipeline is 60% complete and should be ready by September or October this year. Don't count on that. It added, while engineering and environmental impact studies were progressing for the project's Atlantic-bound southern pipeline and export terminals. So, with that said, there's much more to cover, but that's kind of the gist. Why YPF? Because YPF. So here's the thesis consolidated. Why YPF? Well, I'm generally bullish Latin America, and I'm generally bullish oil and gas. But also within that theme is Argentina might be able, instead of stealing defeat from the jaws of victory, to actually steal victory from the jaws of defeat. And a lot of money can be made when things go from really bad to kind of bad. You know, down 80 to down 60 is a triple. It's that kind of math. And if Patricia Bullrich, or even, I don't know, Javier Milei or Loretta, if someone that's not Massa can win, then I think there's a chance. Now, how long do you hold it? How long do you play it? So on and so forth. Those are different questions. But essentially, Argentina elections are creating a potential opportunity and catalyst and pivot point for things to go in the right direction. If they go in the right direction, then I think YPF will be a beneficiary. And that's why I'm playing it, and that's why, as you see, I added it to my portfolio. It makes up roughly 3.5 to 4% of my portfolio. I missed out on the inflection of the trade. Now, you could say it's just at the beginning, and it might be, but I think it could pull back more before going up, and therefore I'll leg into the trade if the thesis still holds together. You know, if a lot of people who's bought low, maybe they're selling now because they don't want to take that pre-election risk, and they're happy to sell out at 100% profit. Like, fair enough. And then that means I'll put selling pressure on the stock. And since, like I said, I eyeballed this in mid to early June, and I've been waiting to enter. I've finally entered. So here we are. That's why it's not as large as it otherwise could be. Plus, it's not the most highest conviction trade. I was sitting at roughly 36 to 38% cash. I'm now down to 32% cash, which would allow, since I like to say at 25%, I could put more into this trade, but we'll just see how things play out. I also added TFPM to my portfolio, which is Triple Flag. It's a precious metals royalty company. I added that. And uranium's actually doing well again. But of course I say that every other month and then it just retraces. So can't trust uranium. Louisiana Pacific, LPX, that's fallen hard in the past couple of weeks since earnings were released. Kinross Gold is rebounding. Gold names, maybe they're washed out. They're going to rebound. I don't know. Silver names like Pan American Silver, PAAS, which I do not own, they bounced hard and then they've given back much of the gains over the last month. Same thing like wheat. If you want to trade wheat through a medium, WEAT, it ran hard, then it gave back much of the gains. Then the Valaris, the Transocean, the Tidewaters, they've reported, that's thunder if you hear that. They've reported earnings, and Tidewater opened up a few days ago 10% down. After hours, it was down 10%. And I thought about putting a buy order in for a share, and I didn't. And that thing rallied 11% intraday, and it's doing great. So that's where we're at with the portfolio. That's my thoughts on Argentina and YPF. Do your own research on that. There's more to discover, more conviction to build in yourself. Elections are volatile like Turkey. I figured Erdogan was going to get it. And he did. And you could say inflation was quite bad there, and fair enough. But I thought Erdogan was going to get it. And Turkey might be the third theme of the year that I'm upset for not participating in, because I actually did enter a position in it a couple weeks back and only held it for a few days, and I just don't have the conviction to buy it and hold it seemingly. So I pitched it for a couple of percent, and now it's up, 20%. So, too bad for that. And I think with that said, this has gone on long enough. Thank you for watching, and until next time.